Hey guys, how we doing? So we're on another Giguk video, looking through his stuff, and I've seen that he's got an interesting one called Isekai, the genre that took over anime. And you know what? It really is the anime, the genre that took over anime. Like, my god, like, you've got Sword Art Online that's really super popular. You've got fucking Konosuba, which was amazing, but that also like took the mick out of it in places, I suppose. And then it's still going. Like, I'm about to watch, because I'm trying to keep up to date with stuff now, How Not to Summon a Demon Lord, which is apparently an isekai. And funnily enough, and Giguk even said this to me when I was pitching him my idea. My idea for my abridgment is technically an isekai in itself, if you were to put it into a genre. Which made me like do like, oh, I'm falling into that same thing as well. So let's get his take on this. This is Isekai, the genre that took over anime.
Hey guys, today I wanted to talk about the newest, hottest anime to come out this season, alright? Get this. It's about a completely normal shut-in otaku with a very specific skill set that makes him useless in the real world, who's suddenly transported to a fantasy world, kind of similar to any JRPG you've ever seen, where he suddenly becomes the hottest shit, and he has two jobs: messing up any poor soul who looks at him the wrong way, and getting some 2D bitches.
Yeah.
Wait. Doesn't this sound oddly familiar?
Yes.
Well, if you're a fan of anime, or at least aware of modern anime, it should, as what I just described is a basic premise for a show in the genre of Isekai, which roughly translates to another world.
Yes.
In recent times, it's been pretty hard to escape shows in the Isekai genre, to the point where every season there always seems to be one or two new additions with variations to the premise.
Yeah, it's
another
true.
world, but with a smartphone. Another world, but with a world of games. Another world, but with a group of dickheads. If you've been following anime for the past few years, you can't have missed it. And it's taken up some spots for some of the most popular anime to come out each year. But how did this come to be? How did such a seemingly niche idea end up rising to become almost as prominent in anime as High School, Mecha, or Slice of Life?
How did it?
Is there anywhere left for the genre to go? Well, today I thought it'd be interesting to explore the roots of the genre, why it's gripped modern audiences so much, and the evolution it's taken to get to where we are now. See, when we think of modern isekai, we have a general idea of the tropes and cliches of the plot and worlds that we normally see. The concept of a main character being transported to another world is by no means new or even exclusive to the world of anime.
No.
And if we are going to explore the roots of the genre, we have to travel back a pretty long time.
Oh. How far are we going? Oh. Alice in Wonderland. Interesting.
If we were to go back to the first piece of prominent fiction to really nail down a character being transported to another world, it would be hard to argue against Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, way back in 1865. One of the most iconic stories ever told that's been referenced and adapted countless times in just about every medium imaginable, could very well be considered the progenitor of Isekai. It went on to directly influence other hugely impactful works of its kind, like The Wizard of Oz and The Chronicles of Narnia, all of which laid the groundwork for what is now common practice in the genre. With such classic stories influencing global media, it would only be natural for the concept to hit anime, and while Alice in Wonderland itself did in fact get an anime adaptation from March of 1983, a mere month before that saw the first episode air of something a bit closer to the tones and themes of the isekai shows of today. Aura Battler Dunbean, produced by Studio Sunrise, was one of their recent follow-up works to Mobile Suit Gundam. It saw a young male protagonist from Tokyo get transported to a fantasy world resembling medieval England, full of giant robots and mythical creatures, which definitely sounds like isekai. Now, I'm guessing that very few of you would have even heard of Dunbean. I mean, I certainly didn't until I did research for this video, with its direct influence and legacy being fairly non-existent, as the modern consensus of fantasy world in anime would really start a little later, in the decade of the 90s.
90s? What we got? The Spice Girls! Yes, friends! Let's go floaty! Yes! Yes!
If we were to look at early isekai work in anime before anyone even really called them isekai, we think of some fantasy shows in the 90s, and the one that most obviously comes to mind for old school fans would most likely be The Vision of Escaflowne.
So good!
So that wasn't the only one.
Love
Shows like Magic Knight Raya, 12 Kingdoms, and most notably Inuyasha have a main character transported to a different world, but these shows are certainly not very reminiscent of the isekai shows we know of today. The fantasy world these shows are set in seem more rooted in that of traditional fantasy.
Yeah, they are, I suppose,
Old Japanese or Western folklore. They have more in common with the worlds of Alice in Wonderland and The Wizard of Oz than they do any modern isekai.
That's true.
Like the two classics, they all share another thing. A female protagonist.
Yeah.
See, back then, rather than being its own genre with its own tropes and cliches, these shows were seen as more of an extension of the myriad of fantasy anime that came out in the 90s. And as the fantasy trend started to die out when the 2000s came along, it was only then that the calling cards of what we now expect from isekai to become prevalent in the genre. Gone were our female protagonist and traditional fantasy worlds. Dot Hack and the Greed Island arc of Hunter x Hunter's original adaptation introduced the idea of having your conscience trapped in a virtual world. And Zero no Tsukaima in 2006 saw harem elements added, and most importantly came in a time when the idea of light novel adaptations were just starting.
Right.
Combine all these aspects and you have the building blocks for the show that marked the explosion of the modern isekai genre as we know it. What show am I talking about? What other show could I be talking about?
I say, yo. Of course.
I know we're all sick and tired of hearing about Sword Art Online by now, but it's impossible to discuss this genre without mentioning the massive
talk
impact
about
this
this
show
without
had.
that.
I've already talked in depth about how Sword Art Online got popular and how it filled in a niche of popular anime targeted towards gamers in a time when there wasn't much competition.
Why isn't it
and
done
through its success, it marks the point where the genre we know today as Isekai really found its footing. If we compare SAO to the previously mentioned shows in the 90s, you can see a massive shift at the way the concept is approached. This time, we had a male protagonist, one who was way more powerful than everyone around him with an entourage of love interests.
Okay,
rather than be set in a traditional fantasy world, the setting was more akin to an RPG fantasy world. And this, I think, is the most noticeable change. It makes sense for SAO as all the members are stuck in a video game, but it seems like the world that characters are transported to nowadays have more of a grounding in classic fantasy JRPGs like Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger, with the same tropes that would envelop such a world. What the show did was make these elements marketable, and while some still argue that Sword Art Online isn't technically an isekai as their real bodies didn't get transported anywhere, it didn't matter as it left its mark. The groundwork was set for the rise of a new trend, and shows would pull more from aspects in SAO than anything that came before. For better or worse, the new isekai was here to stay.
So video game related, isn't it?
Just what is it that makes
Log
isekai
Horizon,
such an appealing genre?
No Game No
You can take a
Life,
look at some of the more prominent ones and
ReZero.
say, well, isn't it just escapism, a self-insert, or just a power fantasy?
All that power. Oh yeah, Overlord as well.
In a broad sense, it's hard to argue against it. One of the best things the Isekai platform allows for is having far more relatable main characters than traditional fantasy, on a surface level at least. Having someone from our world coming to terms with and learning the ways of this new world allows the audience to share their experience of learning about said world.
We learn it with them,
There's
don't we?
generally very little need for wordy exposition early because the way the story plays out tends to favour gradual progression and development in world building.
Yeah.
It's this reliance on making the protagonist relatable that has many of these characters start out as gamers or anime fans in their own world. If there is a definitive platform that thrives on self-insert characters, it is Isekai, and in many ways turns the genre into one of the truest forms of escapism, at least as long as you are a part of that wide target audience, whether you are a gamer, or a gamer.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. I think we might be onto something here.
Yeah.
Now Isekai technically means another world, which could be any type of world. Modern Isekai has almost become synonymous with an RPG world.
Video game
Knights,
stuff, innit?
mages, spells, NPCs, a power system based on RPG
But isn't that like
stats.
showing
the story
how
is something
society
more akin to an actual
is now?
gaming world like in Log Horizon, or a much more brutal and unforgiving take at the genre like in Grimgar, Fantasy and Ash. It's to the point now where I completely forgot that a show like Danmachi wasn't in fact an Isekai show.
No, it's not.
There is no guy transported to another world.
That's just where they live.
Are just in another world,
Yeah.
but because of the tropes that are present in it and the
It seems
RPG-like
like
world
it.
that it's set in, I completely thought it was until rereading up on it made me remember otherwise. If we look at the most popular shows in the genre that came out after Sword Art Online, we see the different appeal that made them stand out and the evolution of how a different aspect of the genre was explored in order to do so.
Right.
No Game No Life played on some of the same power fantasies as in SAO, but instead of showing that through action scenes or raw strength, it was through interesting contests and entertaining mind games.
Yeah.
Konosuba took the standard setting and
Konosuba.
added in a memorable and colourful cast who bounced off each other well,
So
bringing out the wacky humour that we loved, essentially making a sitcom in a setting we don't normally see as sitcoms.
Yeah.
And finally, ReZero took all the tropes we thought we were familiar with and tired of and subverted them, deconstructing the overpowered otaku protagonist that we were just watching a few seasons ago. But the one thing that remains constant is just that, the setting. Every one of these shows still has a grounding in an RPG fantasy world, even if the shows have nothing to do with video games itself. In some way, it's still appealing to the same demographic of gamers that allowed SAO to take over the community to begin with. The ones that grew up playing these types of games, and in some cases the protagonists are as familiar with the genre of RPGs as the audience is. While the main appeal of the popular Isekai titles at some level draw in that gamer crowd, with the sheer number of titles coming out now, we are starting to see stories that explore other aspects of Isekai. And the reason this is possible is because these shows are normally based on light novels, and there are a lot of light novels to
Jesus
pick
Christ.
from, which in turn can cause a lot of these anime adaptations to suffer from a lot of the same problems light novel adaptations suffer from. One, of course, being incomplete adaptations. All the titles I mentioned still have
like they just seem like we no game, no life. I want that to carry on.
And with that said, I'm happy to announce
Give me more.
offer in collaboration with Bookwalker, who just released Volume 5 of ReZero officially translated. Nice. As I'm sure you all know by now, Bookwalker are Kadokawa's official ebook service for light novels, including the likes of SAO, No Game No Life, Konosuba, Danmachi, and they are also doing a special giveaway to celebrate the release of Volume 5 of ReZero. If you buy any volume of ReZero, you have the chance of winning either a signed illustration by the author, this Rem figure, or a Rem and Ram desk trash bin.
Cool.
Yes, a fucking trash bin, which I would love myself if they weren't giving it away. So unless you have already used it in the past, all you need to do is use coupon code GIGUK at checkout to buy any ebook for $5 off. See, in many ways, the Isekai trend runs hand in hand with the rise of light novel adaptations as a whole. It's only been within the last decade that light novels have become such a common source of material for anime. But why is it that Isekai in particular has such an abundance of light novels? Today there are hundreds of different light novels from hundreds of different authors, and Isekai holds a large portion of this. But where are they all coming from? What could cause the market to be dominated in such a fashion?
Isn't it the competition they have in Japan?
When looking into this further, I stumbled upon something quite interesting, and the pieces started to click. One of the biggest outlets for this is the site Shosetsuka ni Naro, which literally translates to becoming a novelist. This is a website that relies on user-generated content, and is
people submit it, and then as it becomes the most popular thing, people do that, and then want to get published.
Which are free to distribute and free to read by all individuals that use the site. Hosting hundreds of thousands of novels with a registered user base close to 1 million, its reach has not gone unnoticed by some of the biggest publishers and distributors in Japan. To put this in perspective, the likes of Log Horizon, ReZero, Konosuba, and Mahoka were first published on this platform. The last season alone, 3 entirely different series got anime adaptations based on works from this website, all of which were Isekai.
That's some
Restaurant to Another World and Another World with My Smartphone. And you know what? This makes perfect sense. What better source of stories that can appeal to the community of gamers and anime fans than the actual community itself? Of course, a genre that is so
makes so much sense.
Protagonists and an understanding of exploring these stories through relatable eyes would come from user-generated content. The sheer quantity of Isekai stories specifically that came from this platform is absurd to think about, but it truly goes to show that this genre at the moment is the bread and butter of the
people enjoy it.
As far as large publishers for light novels are concerned, though, it has even gotten to the point now where they are having to actively restrict how many new stories based around young male characters in the fantasy worlds are being created. Kodansha's entertainment novels that adults want to read contest, a light novel contest which in itself sounds as stupidly wordy as your typical light novel title, had to set a rule where all stories that contained a teenage protagonist in any form of isekai were banned. So if even
makes sense because you're going to oversaturate the genre if you have all that.
It's clear that this concept has grown way beyond what anyone could have expected. With the sheer volume of new isekai stories coming out, it doesn't look like it's slowing down anytime soon. But we've gotten to the point now where the genre has become so saturated that just about every original twist on the premise seemingly has been done. To the point where we are starting to subvert the tropes that have been established with other works in its own genre. So where can we possibly go from here? Well, here's the interesting part. Out of all the tropes in the genre that have been picked apart, explored, expanded on, subverted, or even satirized, there is one part that has remained almost untouched. The fantasy part. A pure fantasy without any RPG elements or transported to another world is something that audiences won't be completely tired of, and this is something that we've actually seen in recent seasons. One of the big reasons Made in Abyss felt like such a monumental breath of fresh air last season was because here was a pure fantasy without any of the traditional Isekai storytelling mechanics that have taken over recent fantasy animes within the past few years. And the show itself ended up being a prominent contender for Anime of the Year. Seriously, if you didn't finish this show last season, it is absolutely amazing.
I'll check
it out. One of the best examples anime has to offer of a captivating and wonderful story remaining completely true to the core ideals of a fantasy fiction. And if you should watch one show this year that's not My Hero Academia, it's this one. But it doesn't stop there either, as some of the most high-profile anime coming out this year have their roots in traditional fantasy again, rather than the world of modern Isekai fantasy. Little Witch Academia was one of the most hyped shows earlier this winter, which probably would have gained more traction within the community if Netflix had made it widely available as it was airing. And this season, The Ancient Magus Bride is gaining a lot of attention and traction for the way it's presenting its fantastical world within modern England. We may end up going full circle back to the genre's roots in traditional fantasy, and I find that hilariously ironic, as it was because of the Isekai genre itself that traditional fantasy started to die out in anime. Whatever the future for this genre, whether hundreds more Isekai stories get pumped out or we get swallowed up by fantasy again, or if both die out, we shouldn't forget that trends come and go all the time.
Oh yeah, definitely.
At the end of the day, getting transported to another world is just a premise that got immensely popular. But stories don't have to be completely original to be good. You can take all the tropes that have been established and refine them, or put a creative spin on it, which admittedly is harder and harder to do with just how saturated Isekai has become, but it's not impossible. We thought we were completely tired of it at the beginning of last year, then Konosuba made us realise that we weren't. We thought there was nowhere left for the genre to go. Then Re:Zero came out.
Amazing.
And though it's much harder now to leave an impression on me with this premise, if there is a new story that comes out that is just well written or entertaining that also happens to be an Isekai, I will still gladly welcome it with open arms.
I will.
Again, I would like to thank Bookwalker for inspiring
I feel
this
like
video.
if it's written
check
well,
out all their selection of Isekai
so
novels if you found some interest, all in the description below. And remember, if you want to enter the prize draw for Re:Zero, you can buy any volumes, including Volume 5, which was just released. And remember
I'm
to
going to have to read those, I'm getting frustrated not knowing
checkout.
what's going on after the end of the anime.
I have today, as I'm actually in Japan right now, and this is all pre-recorded, so no Patreon shouts out today. I will be back soon though, so until then, hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you all next time.
That was cool. I like it. Giguk's so informative and funny at the same time. He refers to the characters of Konosuba as dickheads. I was just like, that's genius. But yeah, Isekai really has taken over the genre. And it's still going. Like I said, I'm about to start watching How Not to Summon a Demon Lord because some of you have suggested it, and that's an Isekai. And Overlord's still going. It's on its 3rd season now, isn't it? Overlord 3 just come out. I just need to watch Overlord 2. So people are still watching it. I imagine it wouldn't have a 3rd season if 2 didn't do very well, or at least partway through wasn't do too well, because it only was like a couple of weeks before, in between 2 finishing and 3 starting off. So that's still going. And yeah, we've got more Sword Art Online coming. That's still going. Like even Alternate was brilliant. That was like an example of like good writing and characters like within it. That's cool. Going into video games still, and that was done really well. So yeah, it's still going. I don't think it's going to die out anytime soon, because people still want to see it. People want to watch it. Like I love it. If it's decent, characters are decent, it's written well, bring it. I'll watch it. It's fine. So yeah. That's cool. Thank you very much for watching. What did you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe if you haven't already. Leave comments down below. Let me know what I should watch and discuss in future videos. And I'll see you guys, yes, all of you guys, next time.